The wind began its low, mournful song long before the rain started. Eleanor, hunched over a particularly fragile parchment in the dimly lit library of Blackwood Manor, barely registered it at first. Her world was a universe of faded ink and ancient secrets, of a past that whispered to her from the brittle pages. The manor, a sprawling Gothic edifice nestled deep in the Cumbrian fells, was her current obsession. A painstaking restoration project that had consumed her for the better part of a year. She ran a gloved finger along a faint watermark, a delicate scrollwork that had almost eluded her. The scent of old paper and beeswax polish was a familiar comfort, a balm to her often overactive mind. But then the wind intensified, rattling the leaded panes in their ancient frames, and a deeper, more primal sound began to penetrate her sanctuary. The rhythmic drumming of rain, growing from a gentle patter to a furious deluge against the stone walls. Outside, the late autumn sky had bled into a bruised purple, then an impenetrable black. The storm, which had been merely a distant threat on the morning forecast, was now throwing itself against Blackwood with a formidable, almost sentient rage. A floorboard creaked above her, and Eleanor's head snapped up. She wasn't alone. Liam. He was probably still up on the third floor, inspecting the roof timbers, oblivious to the gathering tempest. Or, more likely, perfectly aware and simply unconcerned. Liam Thorne had an unnerving calm about him, an almost elemental stillness that seemed to defy the chaos of the modern world. He was the lead architect on the structural restoration, a man of quiet strength and even quieter observation, with hands that seemed capable of coaxing life back into decaying wood and stone. She pushed her chair back, the sound a scrape in the sudden lull of the wind. Her fingers twitched, a sudden urge to check the secure storage of the more vulnerable documents. The manor was equipped with a generator, but such a storm. A sudden violent crack of thunder directly overhead made the ancient chandelier above her head sway precariously. The library, illuminated primarily by a single standing lamp and the faint glow from the windows, plunged into an even deeper gloom for a heart-stopping second. Then, with a soft sigh, the lamp flickered and died. Darkness. Absolute, inky darkness, broken only by the flashes of lightning that momentarily etched the skeletal branches of the ancient oaks outside against the glass. Eleanor stood very still, her breath catching in her throat. The silence, after the initial shock, was profound, punctuated only by the roaring wind and the drumming rain. She hated the dark, a childish aversion she'd never quite outgrown. It felt like an absence, a void waiting to be filled with unknown things. "Ellie!" Liam's voice, a low rumble, cut through the oppressive quiet. It was closer than she expected, and a surprising wave of relief washed over her. He must have come down when the first flicker happened, sensing the inevitable. "Liam," she replied, her own voice a little too sharp, a little too high. "Are you all right?" "Fine. Just tripped over a very indignant broom in the hallway. Power's out, I take it." His voice was closer still, a deliberate, unhurried tread echoing in the vast space. She could almost feel the shift in the air as he moved towards her. "Completely," she confirmed, trying to sound composed. "The generator should kick in, but this storm..." "It's a fierce one," he agreed. "The main lines are probably down for miles. No chance of getting out tonight, I'm afraid. Or anyone getting in." The implication hung in the air. They were truly alone. Trapped. In the vast ancient house, with only the storm and each other for company. A shiver, not entirely from the chill in the air, traced its way up Eleanor's spine. A small click, then a soft scrape. The scent of sulfur, then a dancing flame. Liam had a match, and the tiny beacon illuminated his face for a fleeting moment. The strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of his brow, his eyes dark and steady even in the flickering light. He lit a candle he must have retrieved from a nearby sconce, then another, placing them strategically on the large oak table where she'd been working. The library began to yield its secrets again. Shadows dancing in the corners, the spines of countless books gleaming faintly. "Come, let's get a fire going," he suggested, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. It's going to be a cold night. Eleanor nodded, grateful for the sense of purpose. She followed him through the maze of furniture, the candlelight casting their elongated shadows on the walls. He moved with an easy grace, his broad shoulders filling the narrow passages between shelves. She found herself watching the way the soft light caught the dark strands of his hair, the strong column of his neck. In the cavernous drawing room, a magnificent fireplace, carved with scenes of hunting and heraldry, dominated one wall. Liam was already kneeling, expertly arranging kindling and logs. He moved with a quiet efficiency that was both reassuring and intensely masculine. Eleanor, usually so self-sufficient, found herself simply observing, a passenger in the sudden shift of their evening. He struck another match, and soon a small tentative flame began to lick at the kindling. The wood caught, crackling softly, spitting sparks into the darkness. As the fire grew, it began to push back the chill, radiating a comforting warmth that slowly seeped into Eleanor's bones. The shadows, instead of being ominous, now danced with a playful energy, softening the grandeur of the room. Liam sat back on his heels, watching the fire, his profile illuminated by its glow. His hands, usually busy with blueprints or tools, were now resting casually on his knees, large and capable. Eleanor found her gaze drawn to them, remembering the careful way he'd handled a fragile piece of plasterwork, the strength with which he'd heaved a fallen beam. "Better?" he asked, turning his head slightly to look at her. His eyes, the color of deep amber in the firelight, met hers. "Much?" she breathed, pulling a plush armchair closer to the hearth. "Thank you." He simply nodded, then stood, stretching his long frame. "I should check the emergency lanterns in the kitchen, and maybe see if we have any bottled water. This could be a long night." Eleanor watched him go, the firelight clinging to his retreating figure. She found herself strangely reluctant for him to leave, even for a moment. The sudden intimacy of the shared darkness, the quiet presence of another person, was both unsettling and profoundly comforting. He returned a few minutes later, carrying 2 large battery-powered lanterns that cast a brighter, steadier light than the candles, along with a bottle of water and a small bag of shortbread biscuits. "Not exactly a feast, but it'll do," he said, placing them on a small side table. He settled into the armchair opposite hers, stretching his long legs towards the fire. The silence that followed was different from the oppressive quiet of the library. Here, by the fire, with the storm still raging outside, it felt companionable, weighted with unspoken things. Eleanor hugged her knees to her chest, feeling the warmth of the fire on her face. "I suppose this means no hot tea tonight," she mused aloud, a hint of something like disappointment in her voice. Tea was her ritual, her anchor at the end of a long day. Liam chuckled, a low, warm sound that resonated in the quiet room. "I think we can manage to boil some water on the fire if you're truly desperate. I saw an old cast-iron kettle in the scullery." Her gaze met his. "Would you really?" "For a true connoisseur of Darjeeling, anything," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. His eyes held a glint of humor, and something else, a warmth that made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way few people ever managed. He stood again, moving towards a heavy oak cabinet. "In the meantime," he said, his back to her, "I think Blackwood Manor might hold a few other treasures, more suited to a stormy night." A moment later he returned with 2 crystal tumblers and a bottle of amber liquid. Single malt, for medicinal purposes of course. He poured a generous measure into each glass, the rich, smoky scent of the whiskey mingling with the ancient aroma of the house and the fresh, clean scent of the rain outside. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. The contact was fleeting, barely there, yet it sent a surprising jolt through her. Her skin tingled where he had touched it. Eleanor took a sip, the warmth of the whiskey spreading through her, chasing away the last vestiges of chill. It was potent, smooth, and utterly delicious. "To the storm," she said, raising her glass. "To unexpected evenings," Liam replied, his gaze still holding hers over the rim of his glass. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling fire, the howl of the wind, and the relentless drumming of the rain. The storm seemed to grow even fiercer, shaking the very foundations of the old house. But inside their circle of firelight, it felt strangely safe, insulated from the wild world beyond. Eleanor found herself studying Liam. His face, usually a canvas of quiet concentration, was softened by the firelight. The lines around his eyes, a little less pronounced. He had a strong classic profile and a quiet confidence that was deeply appealing. She'd always admired his professionalism, his dedication to his craft, but tonight, stripped of the usual workday distractions, she was seeing a different side of him. A more relaxed, perhaps even vulnerable side. She recalled their first meeting, nearly a year ago. She, the meticulous historian, a whirlwind of facts and figures. He, the pragmatic architect, calm and collected amidst the dust and chaos of the initial survey. They had clashed initially, their approaches to the manor's restoration seemingly at odds. She saw the past, he saw the future. Yet, over time, a mutual respect had grown, slowly blossoming into something akin to friendship, though always within the strict confines of their professional roles. Until now. "You know," Liam began, breaking the comfortable quiet, his voice a low murmur, "I've often wondered what this house would have been like in its prime. Filled with life, laughter, music." Eleanor smiled, a genuine soft smile that reached her eyes. "It's something I think about constantly. The people who walked these halls, what they dreamed, what they feared. Every document I uncover tells a piece of that story." She paused, taking another sip of the warming whiskey. "But I think tonight, it feels as alive as it ever has. Perhaps more so. The storm brings it to life." "It certainly makes you feel its age," Liam agreed, a thoughtful look on his face. "Every groan of timber, every rattle of glass. It reminds you that it stood for centuries, weathering countless storms, just like this one. And it will stand for many more," Eleanor said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "Thanks to you." He turned his head, his gaze meeting hers again. There was a flicker in his eyes, a momentary softening that made her breath catch. "It's a team effort, Ellie. We're both just trying to preserve something beautiful." The word, beautiful, hung in the air between them, imbued with a new, unspoken meaning. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the whiskey. He wasn't just talking about the house anymore. Liam leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze unwavering. "What's the most interesting thing you've found so far? A secret passage, a hidden treasure?" Eleanor laughed softly. "No secret passages, I'm afraid. Not yet, anyway, and the only treasure I've found is in the stories. A collection of letters, for instance, between a young woman living here in the 18th century and her sweetheart who was away at sea, full of longing and hope and a desperation that transcends time." "Longing," Liam repeated, his voice a low murmur. He didn't elaborate, but the single word, spoken with that particular inflection, felt loaded with meaning. The air between them thickened, charged with a subtle, electric current. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken, a subtle flutter beneath her ribs. She found herself acutely aware of his presence, the scent of him, a clean, earthy smell, like wood smoke and fresh air, mingled with something more distinctly masculine. She shifted in her seat, suddenly feeling a little too warm, a little too exposed. "And you?" she asked, trying to regain a sense of normalcy. "What's the most surprising thing you've discovered about the manor?" He leaned back, his eyes still on her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It's resilience. It's sheer stubbornness to simply endure." And, he paused, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. "The hidden beauty you sometimes find in the most unexpected places." His words, and the way he delivered them, felt like a caress. Eleanor's breath hitched. The romantic tension, always a faint hum beneath their professional interactions, was now a palpable presence in the room, shimmering in the firelight. She took another sip of her whiskey, needing the bite of it to steady herself. The storm continued its relentless assault, but within the drawing room, a different kind of storm was brewing. "The roof repairs," she said, forcing herself to focus on something concrete, something professional. "How are they progressing, despite this?" Liam sighed, a practical note returning to his voice, though his gaze still held a certain intensity. "Slowly. This weather isn't helping. We'll need a few more clear days before we can finish the lead work around the north turret. I was up there this afternoon just before it broke. The wind was already picking up. You could feel it in your bones." "You were on the roof in this weather?" she asked, a sudden surge of concern overriding her other thoughts. "Liam, that's incredibly dangerous." He shrugged, a dismissive gesture. "Just checking the bracing. Had to make sure everything was secure for the night. Wouldn't want a piece of the manor ending up in the next county." He smiled, a genuine open smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Besides, I'm not exactly new to heights or to bad weather." Eleanor found herself admiring his quiet bravery, his dedication. He was a man who took pride in his work, who literally shouldered the responsibility of keeping this grand old house standing. The whiskey in her glass was almost gone. The warmth had spread through her limbs, loosening her, making her feel more open than usual. The fire crackled, casting long dancing shadows on the walls, making the old portrait seem to watch them with knowing eyes. "It's late," she murmured, glancing at her wrist, forgetting her watch was useless without electricity. "And there's no way of knowing when the power will return." "No," Liam agreed, his voice soft. "I suppose we should think about getting some rest. Though with this storm, I doubt much sleep will be had." He rose, stretching again, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt. He was tall, powerfully built, but with a lean grace that spoke of hard work and physical capability. Eleanor found her gaze tracing the line of his back, the breadth of his shoulders. "I'll just grab a few more candles for the hallway and for our rooms," he said, moving towards the cabinet again. "And then I should probably check the lower windows, make sure nothing's breached." Eleanor stood as well, feeling a sudden reluctance for the evening to end, for the intimate bubble around the fire to burst. "I'll come with you," she offered, surprising herself. "I can help with the candles." He turned, a slight smile on his face. "You don't have to, Ellie. I know you're not a fan of the dark." A faint blush rose to her cheeks. She hadn't realized he'd noticed that particular quirk. "It's fine," she insisted, more firmly than she intended. "Besides, it's good to have another pair of eyes." He simply nodded, his smile widening slightly, and retrieved a small candelabra from the cabinet. He lit the 3 candles within it, handing it to her. The flickering light illuminated her face, making her eyes gleam. They walked through the silent, cavernous house, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpets. The only light came from their candles and the 2 lanterns Liam carried. The storm's roar seemed to amplify in the unlit corridors, the wind a banshee wailing around the turrets. Eleanor held the candelabra steady, her hands surprisingly calm. Liam walked slightly ahead, his broad shoulders a comforting presence in the gloom. The air grew cooler as they moved away from the fire, carrying the scent of damp stone and old wood. They checked the lower windows, Liam testing the latches, his strong hands moving with practiced efficiency. Eleanor held the light, watching him, the way his muscles moved, the focused intensity in his eyes. Their proximity in the narrow passages, the shared task in the darkness, deepened the sense of intimacy between them. When they had secured the last window, they stood for a moment in the main hallway, the grand staircase spiraling upwards into impenetrable darkness. "Well," Liam said, his voice a little lower now, a little softer. "That's all we can do for tonight." Eleanor nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The thought of ascending that dark staircase alone, of retreating to her solitary room, felt suddenly daunting, almost unbearable. The warmth of the fire, the shared whiskey, the quiet companionship, it had all woven a spell around her, making the idea of separation feel like a harsh awakening. "I suppose so," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Liam turned fully towards her, his gaze searching hers in the dim light. The candelabra she held cast dancing shadows on their faces, making their features seem sharper, more intense. "Are you all right, Ellie?" he asked, his voice gentle, laced with a concern that made her heart ache. She met his gaze, unable to look away. Yes, she lied, the word catching in her throat. This house can be a little overwhelming in the dark. He reached out, his large hand gently touching her arm, just above the elbow. The contact was electric, a jolt that spread through her veins, chasing away any lingering chill. His thumb stroked softly, lightly, against the fabric of her sleeve. It's a lot to take in, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Especially when the world outside goes wild. His touch was warm, comforting, yet undeniably sensual. Eleanor felt a tremor run through her. Her skin beneath the fabric seemed to hum, alive with a sensation she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to lean into it, to feel the full warmth of his hand, the strength of his arm. Their eyes locked, and in the flickering candlelight, she saw a depth of emotion in his gaze that mirrored her own burgeoning feelings. Desire, yes, but also a tenderness, a longing that resonated deep within her. The storm outside raged, but the air between them was still, heavy with unspoken words, with the weight of burgeoning possibility. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. He leaned closer, his head tilting, his eyes still fixed on hers. She could feel his breath on her cheek, warm and soft. The scent of him, the clean, masculine scent, filled her senses, intoxicating her. "Ellie," he breathed, his voice a low, husky whisper, a counterpoint to the howling wind. His hand moved from her arm, slowly, deliberately, up towards her shoulder, his fingers brushing the delicate curve of her neck. Her breath hitched. She felt herself drawn to him, an irresistible magnetic pull. The candelabra in her hand suddenly felt heavy, forgotten. All that existed was the space between them, shrinking by the second. His thumb grazed the soft skin behind her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Her eyelids fluttered, her lips parting slightly. She felt a profound longing, a yearning that had been dormant for too long, now awakened by his presence, by his touch, by the intimate darkness that surrounded them. "It's going to be a long night," he whispered, his eyes dark and intense, reflecting the candlelight. He leaned in further, his other hand coming to rest gently on her waist, drawing her imperceptibly closer. She didn't resist. She couldn't. Her heart was pounding, a frantic drum against her ribs. She could feel the warmth of his body, the subtle tension in his muscles. The world narrowed to just the two of them, framed by the flickering candlelight and the wild music of the storm. His gaze dropped to her lips again, lingering there, a silent question. Eleanor's lips tingled, a silent invitation. She raised her free hand, slowly, instinctively, her fingers brushing against the rough fabric of his shirt, then resting lightly on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The wind howled, a primal cry, but within the house the only sound was the thrumming of their blood, the silent, powerful communication of two souls drawn irrevocably together. He leaned in further still, his head dipping, his lips almost brushing hers. The air crackled with anticipation, a delicious agony of waiting. He closed the final fraction of an inch, and her breath hitched. His lips, soft yet firm, brushed hers, a feather-light touch that promised everything and nothing. It was a question, an invitation, a silent plea. Her own lips parted instinctively, a silent assent. And then he was truly there. Pressing, yielding, a slow, tender exploration that sent a shiver through her, a warmth spreading from her core. It wasn't a sudden, ravenous kiss, but a deliberate, unhurried deepening, as if he wanted to savor every molecule of the moment, to taste the very air that had been thrumming between them. His upper lip traced the curve of her lower, a gentle tug, and a soft sigh escaped her, a sound that seemed to vibrate through their joined mouths. She felt the subtle shift in his stance, the way his body leaned into hers, creating a solid wall of warmth. Her fingers, still resting on his chest, curled slightly, gripping the rough fabric as if to anchor herself against the delicious disorientation. The steady rhythm of his heart beneath her palm quickened, mirroring her own frantic beat. He tasted of crisp night air and something uniquely him, a clean earthy scent that was both intoxicating and comforting. Her hands slid from his chest, up his shoulders, finding purchase in the thick hair at the nape of his neck, her fingers tangling, pulling him closer still. His free hand, which had been hovering, protective and hesitant, finally settled at the small of her back, pressing her body flush against his. The sudden, intimate contact of their forms, the press of hip against hip, thigh against thigh, sent another jolt through her. She felt the warmth radiating from him, the subtle flex of muscle, the undeniable strength that enveloped her. The kiss deepened, becoming more confident, more demanding. His tongue, a velvet whisper, grazed hers, igniting a spark that flared into a searing heat. She met him, matched him, lost in the slow, intoxicating dance. The world outside, with its raging tempest, receded. There was only the roar of the fire in the hearth, a counterpoint to the roaring in her ears, and the exquisite sensation of his mouth on hers, his body against hers. It was a kiss that spoke volumes, a silent conversation of longing and recognition, of a connection forged not just in this moment, but in some deeper unspoken past. When he finally, reluctantly pulled back, it was only by a fraction, their foreheads still touching, their breaths mingling. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, searched hers, a silent question lingering in their depths. Her own eyes, blurred with a mixture of desire and wonder, met his. She saw a reflection of her own raw vulnerability, her unleashed longing. A faint smile, a mere ghost of a curve, played on his lips, a silent acknowledgement of the spell they had both fallen under. "Evelyn," he murmured, his voice a low, husky rumble that vibrated through her, a sound more intoxicating than any music. Her name, from his lips, felt like a revelation, an intimate secret shared. She could only manage a soft gasp, her throat tight with emotion. Her fingers still tangled in his hair, her thumbs brushing the sensitive skin behind his ears. The air between them, though no longer crackling with anticipation, now shimmered with a different kind of energy, a warm, potent current. He didn't move away, but held her close, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles on her lower back, a touch that sent shivers down her spine and pooled warmth low in her belly. "You're cold," he noted, his voice still soft, his gaze dropping to her slightly parted lips, then to the flush on her cheeks. He pulled her closer to the fire, guiding them both to the worn plush rug that lay before the hearth, a relic of an earlier, more opulent time. He sank to his knees, still holding her, and she followed, her skirts pooling around her as she knelt facing him. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across his features, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw, the slight stubble that shadowed his chin, the intense focus in his eyes. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray lock of hair that had escaped its pins. His touch was feather-light, yet incredibly grounding. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern, a stark contrast to the burning desire that still simmered between them. Evelyn nodded, though her mind felt delightfully muddled. "Yes," she whispered, her voice a little breathy. "More than all right." A soft, tentative smile touched her lips, and he returned it, a slow, breathtaking unfolding of his own. He didn't speak, but his gaze was a language unto itself, communicating a depth of feeling that transcended words. He slowly ran his thumb along the line of her jaw, down to the delicate curve of her throat, where her pulse fluttered madly. The warmth of his touch spread, melting the last vestiges of her composure. She found herself leaning into it, a silent plea for more. His eyes dropped to the buttons of her blouse, then back to her eyes seeking permission. The question was clear, unspoken, yet utterly understood. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was happening. This beautiful, impossible connection, unfolding amidst the storm-ravaged night. Slowly, deliberately, he began to unfasten the small pearl buttons of her blouse. Each one seemed to give way with a soft sigh, revealing a sliver more of her skin beneath. His fingers were deft, his touch light, never quite lingering, yet each brush sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He worked his way down, his gaze fixed on her, assessing her reaction, ensuring she was still willing, still present. Evelyn watched his face, mesmerized by the intensity in his eyes, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows. She felt a delicious vulnerability, an exquisite surrender. She had never felt so seen, so desired, so utterly alive. When the last button was undone, he didn't pull the fabric open immediately. Instead, he paused, his gaze lingering on the delicate lace of her camisole beneath, the soft swell of her breasts hinted at. Then with a gentle hand, he pushed the edges of her blouse open, exposing the creamy skin of her décolletage, the gentle curve of her collarbones. The warmth of the fire kissed her skin, mingling with the heat emanating from his presence. He leaned in again, this time not for a kiss on the lips, but to press his mouth to the hollow of her throat, just above her camisole. A soft gasp escaped her as his warm breath ghosted over her skin, followed by the soft, tantalizing brush of his lips. He lingered there, tasting, teasing, his tongue a warm, fleeting caress. She arched her neck, offering herself more fully to his ministrations, her fingers tightening their grip on his hair. The scent of him, clean and masculine, filled her senses, intoxicating her further. He moved lower, his lips trailing a path of fire along her collarbone, toward the delicate strap of her camisole. Each touch was a revelation, a silent declaration of his desire. Her skin tingled, alive with sensation. She felt a tremor run through his body as he pressed his cheek against her chest, his ear close enough to hear the frantic thrumming of her heart. "You take my breath away, Evelyn," he murmured, his voice muffled against her skin, a low, guttural confession that sent shivers of pure delight through her. Her hands moved from his hair, down his back, feeling the taut muscles beneath his shirt. She wanted to feel his skin against hers, to shed the barriers that separated them. Instinctively, her fingers found the buttons of his shirt, a silent invitation, a mirrored desire. He straightened, meeting her gaze, a spark of understanding passing between them. With a soft sigh, he began to unbutton his own shirt, his movements slow, deliberate. He peeled back the rough fabric, revealing a broad expanse of chest, dusted with dark hair that narrowed to a line descending to his abdomen. The firelight played across his sculpted muscles, highlighting the strength of his form. Her gaze lingered, appreciating the raw masculinity, the sheer beauty of his body. He was lean, powerful, and utterly captivating. When his shirt was fully open, he shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor beside him. Then, without a word, he reached for her again, his hands gently guiding her blouse off her shoulders, letting it join his shirt on the rug. The cool air of the room, still battling the warmth of the fire, touched her exposed skin, sending a delicious shiver through her. She was now clad only in her camisole and skirt, feeling both vulnerable and incredibly liberated. His eyes, dark and intense, roamed over her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her skin prickle with warmth. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her camisole, then dipping beneath it, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin just above her breast. A soft gasp escaped her, and she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite sensation. "Beautiful," he breathed, the single word a profound compliment that resonated deep within her. He didn't rush, didn't demand. Instead, he continued his slow exploration, his hands moving with a tender reverence that both thrilled and calmed her. His palms cupped her shoulders, then slid down her arms, her forearms, until his fingers intertwined with hers, his thumbs gently stroking the backs of her hands. The connection, though simple, felt incredibly profound, a silent promise of deeper intimacy. He pulled her closer, their knees brushing, the heat between them intensifying. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the warmth radiating from his skin. Her gaze was drawn to the pulse beating strongly at the base of his throat, a testament to the surging emotions within him. She wanted to taste him again, to feel the press of his lips, the gentle demand of his mouth. As if reading her thoughts, he leaned in once more, but this time he didn't go straight for her lips. Instead, his mouth found the delicate curve of her ear, his warm breath sending goosebumps dancing across her skin. "I've wanted to do this since the moment I saw you," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly confession that sent a delicious tremor through her. Her breath hitched. She hadn't realized the depth of his feelings, the quiet intensity beneath his composed exterior. The admission, so raw and honest, disarmed her completely. Her fingers, still intertwined with his, tightened instinctively. He pulled back just enough to meet her gaze, a profound seriousness in his eyes. "And you, Evelyn?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "Yes, I felt it too. The unspoken since the moment I saw you hung in the air, a shared understanding." A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine heartfelt expression that transformed his features, making him appear even more handsome, more approachable. He leaned in again, this time his lips seeking hers with a renewed urgency, a deeper hunger. This kiss was more demanding, more passionate, a reflection of the confessions they had just shared. Her lips parted eagerly, welcoming him, her tongue meeting his in a fervent dance. His hands, which had been holding hers, released them to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. The gentle pressure, the tender caress, made her feel cherished, adored. She responded with equal fervor, her hands finding his bare shoulders, reveling in the feel of warm skin, taut muscle beneath her fingertips. She kneaded gently, exploring the breadth of his shoulders, the strong column of his neck. He broke the kiss, his lips still grazing hers, his breath warm against her mouth. "Let's get you warm, truly warm," he murmured, his eyes alight with a playful mischief that belied the intensity of his gaze. He rose to his feet, pulling her up with him. Her skirt, though heavy, felt suddenly cumbersome. He led her a few steps away from the fireplace, towards a large plush armchair draped with a thick fur throw. It looked incredibly inviting. He gestured for her to sit, and she sank into the soft cushions, the fur surprisingly warm against her bare arms. He knelt before her again, his gaze still fixed on hers. Without a word, he reached for the hem of her skirt. Her breath caught in her throat. She watched, mesmerized, as his strong fingers slowly, carefully unfastened the hooks and eyes at her waist. The fabric, a rich, dark wool, began to loosen. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet intimacy of the room. He pulled the skirt down, inch by slow inch, revealing the delicate lace trim of her petticoat beneath. His eyes lingered for a moment, appreciating the layers, the anticipation of what lay beneath. Then with the same deliberate care he continued, sliding the skirt down her thighs over her knees, until it pooled around her ankles on the rug. He gently lifted her feet, one by one, to free her from the garment, setting it aside with the other clothes. Now she was truly exposed, clad only in her camisole and petticoat. The air, though still cool, felt exhilarating against her bared legs. She felt a blush creep up her neck and cheeks, but it was a blush of pleasure, not embarrassment. His gaze, though intense, held no judgment, only admiration, a deep, abiding appreciation. He sat back on his heels, his eyes tracing the line of her body, from the exposed skin of her décolletage to the curve of her calves. "You are exquisite, Evelyn," he said, his voice a low, reverent whisper. Her gaze met his, and she felt a profound sense of trust, of surrender. This man, a stranger just hours ago, had somehow seen into her soul, had awakened desires she hadn't known she possessed. The storm outside raged, a symphony of wild, untamed nature, but within this room there was only a quiet, burning intimacy, a deepening connection that felt both inevitable and miraculous. He reached out, his fingers finding the ribbon that held her petticoat at her waist. He untied it with a gentle tug, and the soft cotton fabric fell open slightly, revealing the smooth skin of her stomach, the delicate curve of her hips. Her breath hitched again. This was a deeper intimacy, a step closer to complete vulnerability. He didn't remove the petticoat entirely, but let it drape around her, a whisper of modesty still clinging to her, even as he leaned in, his lips finding the bare skin just above her navel. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss there, sending a shockwave of pleasure through her. Her fingers curled into the fur throw, gripping it tightly as she arched slightly, offering herself more fully to his tender ministrations. His hands, strong and warm, slid beneath the fabric of her camisole, tracing the curve of her ribs, then moving upwards, cupping the soft swell of her breasts through the delicate lace. Her nipples, already taut with anticipation, hardened further at his touch, pressing against the fabric, yearning for more. A soft moan escaped her lips, a sound she barely recognized as her own. "You feel incredible," he breathed against her skin, his words a warm caress. He continued to tease, his thumbs brushing lightly over the sensitive peaks, sending delicious shivers through her entire body. The pleasure was almost unbearable, a sweet aching thrum that resonated deep within her. He straightened slightly, his eyes still dark with desire, but also with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "May I?" he asked, his voice low and husky, his gaze fixed on her mouth, then dropping to the lace covering her breasts. Evelyn could only nod, her voice lost somewhere in the rising tide of sensation. She wanted him, desperately, completely. With infinite care he reached behind her, his fingers deft as they unfastened the tiny hooks of her camisole. The lace, a barrier that had felt both protective and restrictive, now fell away, revealing her bare breasts to the flickering firelight. A wave of heat rushed through her, a mixture of vulnerability and exhilaration. His eyes, dark and appreciative, devoured the sight. He reached out, his hands cupping her breasts, his thumbs gently stroking her hardened nipples. The direct contact was electric, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her. She gasped, her head falling back against the soft fur, her eyes closing as she gave herself over to the sensations. He leaned in, his lips finding one taut peak, drawing it gently into his mouth. A cry escaped her, a primal sound of pure pleasure. He suckled softly, his tongue a warm, teasing caress, creating a delicious pull that resonated deep within her core. She tangled her fingers in his hair, holding him closer, silently begging him to continue. He moved from one breast to the other, lavishing attention on each in turn, driving her to the brink of delirium. Her body was a symphony of sensation, every nerve ending alive, humming with exquisite pleasure. The storm outside seemed to fade into a distant murmur, replaced by the roar of blood in her ears, the frantic beating of her heart. He pulled away, his face flushed, his eyes blazing with a desire that mirrored her own. "I want you, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "More than words can say." She reached for him, her hands finding his bare shoulders, pulling him towards her. "And I you," she managed, her voice hoarse with longing. He rose from his kneeling position, gathering her into his arms, lifting her from the armchair with surprising ease. She instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, holding onto him tightly as he carried her. Their bodies pressed flush against each other, skin to skin, the warmth of his bare chest against her bare breasts, the gentle brush of his arousal against her inner thigh. He didn't carry her far, only a few steps, to the plush rug directly in front of the roaring fire. He lowered her gently onto the soft fur, then followed her down, his body covering hers, pressing her into the luxurious warmth of the rug. She felt the full weight of him, the glorious strength, the undeniable heat. His lips found hers again, a hungry, urgent kiss that stole her breath away. Her hands roamed over his back, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her touch, the sheer power of him. She pressed herself closer, yearning to feel every inch of him, to meld their bodies into one. The last vestiges of her petticoat were shed with a gentle tug, leaving her completely bare beneath him. The contrast of the cool air on her skin and the scorching heat of his body was intoxicating. He shifted, his leg moving between hers, creating a delicious friction that made her gasp. His gaze, dark and intense, met hers. "Are you sure, Evelyn?" he asked, his voice a low, husky rumble, full of a tenderness that melted her heart. The storm outside howled, rattling the windows, but in their intimate space, framed by firelight and shadowed by the wild night, the only answer that mattered was the one in her eyes. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, her thumbs stroking his cheekbones. "More than sure," she whispered, her voice firm, unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything." A wave of relief and profound emotion washed over his face. He lowered his head, not to kiss her lips, but to press his forehead against hers. Their breaths mingling, their bodies intertwined. The tension in the air was palpable, a delicious, exquisite ache that promised release, a culmination of all the unspoken desires and shared moments. The fire crackled, casting their forms in a warm golden glow, as the wild night raged on, a fitting backdrop to the primal, beautiful awakening unfolding between them. They lay there heart to heart, skin to skin, on the precipice of something profound, utterly lost in the intoxicating promise of each other. His lips, warm and seeking, drifted from hers, tracing a path along her jawline, down the sensitive curve of her neck. A soft gasp escaped her, a low, throaty sound that vibrated against his ear, as his mouth found the hollow of her throat, lingering there, tasting the salt and sweetness of her skin. Her fingers still tangled in his hair, tightened, an involuntary clench that pulled him impossibly closer. The world outside was a tempest of wind and rain. But within the cabin, a different kind of storm was gathering, an exquisite, slow-building tempest of their own. His hand, which had been resting lightly on her hip, began to move, a feather-light exploration that sent shivers of anticipation through her. It glided over the smooth expanse of her waist, then upward, tracing the delicate curve of her ribs, pausing just beneath the swell of her breast. Her breath hitched, her body arching instinctively into his touch. The fabric of her shirt, thin and soft, became a tantalizing barrier, amplifying the heat of his palm against her skin. He felt the rapid beat of her heart beneath his fingertips, a wild rhythm mirroring his own. She, in turn, discovered the lean strength of his back, the taut muscles beneath her palms as she pressed herself closer. His scent, a primal mix of wood smoke, damp earth, and his own unique masculinity, filled her senses, intoxicating and irresistible. She buried her face in the crook of his neck, inhaling deeply, lost in the raw magnetic pull between them. The fire in the hearth crackled merrily, casting long dancing shadows across the room, illuminating their intertwined forms in a warm golden embrace. With a soft sigh he shifted, his lips finding hers once more, a deeper, hungrier kiss that spoke of unspoken desires finally given voice. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, a silent invitation, and she parted them willingly, meeting him with an eagerness that stole his breath. The kiss deepened, a slow, sensual dance of surrender and desire, their breaths mingling, their souls intertwining with each soft press and lingering taste. His hand continued its journey, gently pushing aside the fabric of her shirt, his fingers brushing against the bare skin of her stomach. The coolness of the night air, quickly replaced by the heat of his touch, made her skin prickle with delicious goosebumps. He trailed his fingers higher, slowly, deliberately, until his thumb grazed the underside of her breast. A low moan escaped her, a sound of pure pleasure, as his hand cupped the soft mound, his thumb gently circling the taut peak. Her own hands were not idle. They explored the breadth of his shoulders, the firm line of his jaw, the sensitive skin behind his ear. She felt the subtle tremor that ran through him as her fingers unbuttoned his shirt, one button at a time, revealing the strong muscled chest beneath. The fabric parted, and she pressed her palm against his warm skin, feeling the steady thrum of his heart against hers. The rough texture of his chest hair was a delicious contrast to the smoothness of his skin, a potent reminder of his undeniable masculinity. Slowly, carefully, they helped each other shed the remaining layers of clothing, each garment falling away like a forgotten memory, until their bodies were finally completely bared to the flickering firelight. The air, though warm from the hearth, felt cool against her skin, only to be chased away by the immediate warmth of his body as he pressed against her. There was no shyness, no hesitation, only a profound sense of rightness, of coming home. He gazed down at her, his eyes dark with desire, yet tender with an adoration that made her heart swell. The soft glow of the fire painted her skin in shades of amber and rose, highlighting the delicate curves of her form. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her collarbone, the delicate slope of her shoulder, the gentle swell of her breasts. Each touch was a silent promise, a reverent exploration. She looked back at him, her gaze meeting his, a silent acknowledgement of the beautiful vulnerability they shared. She revelled in the sight of him, his broad shoulders, his lean torso, the powerful lines of his body. He was magnificent, a primal force of nature, and he was hers, in this moment, in this secluded cabin, shielded from the raging world outside. He lowered his head, his lips finding the soft skin of her inner thigh, sending a jolt of pure electricity through her. She gasped, her fingers tangling once more in his hair, holding him close as he kissed and teased his way upwards, each touch a spark igniting a deeper fire within her. His mouth was warm, tender, yet undeniably potent, leaving a trail of goosebumps and heightened sensation in its wake. Her hips instinctively arched, seeking the pressure, the delicious friction his touch created. The ache that had been building within her, a sweet, exquisite longing, intensified with every breath, every touch, every soft whisper of desire that escaped their lips. She was a symphony of sensations, her body humming with a vibrant, urgent need. He moved above her, his gaze locked with hers, a silent question passing between them. She answered with a soft nod, her eyes shining with anticipation, with trust, with a love that felt as ancient and profound as the mountains surrounding them. With a slow, deliberate movement he pressed forward, the first delicate touch of skin against skin. The exquisite friction, the gentle stretching. A soft sigh escaped her lips, a mix of pleasure and tender yearning, as he slowly, carefully began to join their bodies. The initial sensation was one of fullness, of a deep, satisfying stretch, then of a warmth that spread outwards, consuming her from the inside. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting to feel every inch of him, wanting to be utterly consumed by this beautiful union. He paused, holding himself still, allowing her body to adjust, his eyes searching hers for any sign of discomfort, finding only raw, unadulterated pleasure. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a soft, tender kiss, a silent reassurance, a promise of the ecstasy to come. Then slowly, he began to move, a gentle, rhythmic sway that quickly deepened into a powerful, instinctual dance. The world outside faded into a distant hum as their movements became synchronized, a primal rhythm that echoed the beating of their hearts. Each thrust was a wave of pure sensation washing over her, building higher and higher. She met his every movement, arching into him, whispering his name like a prayer, a mantra of desire. His hands cradled her hips, holding her firmly, guiding their shared rhythm. The firelight danced on their sweat-sheen skin, painting them as ancient lovers, lost in a timeless act of creation. Her fingernails lightly raked his back, a delicious friction that only spurred him on. His breath was ragged in her ear, his lips grazing her temple, her cheek, her neck, leaving a trail of burning kisses. The tension coiled tighter and tighter within her, a delicious, unbearable pressure that yearned for release. Her body trembled, a soft vibration that started deep within her core and spread outwards, making every nerve ending tingle. She cried out, a sound of pure, uninhibited pleasure, as the first wave of climax washed over her. A molten river of sensation that left her breathless and trembling in his arms. He held her close, his movements deepening, drawing out her pleasure, until another wave, even more profound, crashed over her, carrying her away on its powerful current. Her entire being was consumed by the exquisite release, a beautiful shattering that left her feeling utterly vulnerable, utterly adored. He watched her, his eyes filled with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, even as his own body surged towards its peak. With a final powerful thrust, a guttural groan escaped him, and he surrendered to his own release, pouring himself into her, his body trembling, his breath ragged. He collapsed onto her, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in unison, the echoes of their shared climax still vibrating through them. They lay there, entwined, for what felt like an eternity, the storm outside slowly beginning to abate, its fury spent, just as theirs had been. The only sounds were their ragged breaths, the crackle of the fire, and the gentle patter of rain against the window pane. He shifted slightly, propping himself up on an elbow, looking down at her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion as he gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She smiled back, her eyes heavy-lidded with contentment, her body still humming with the aftershocks of their passion. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "are incredible." He leaned down and kissed her softly, a tender, lingering kiss that spoke volumes of the connection they had forged. Then, he pulled the thick, woolen blanket up over them, tucking it around their naked bodies, cocooning them in warmth and comfort. She snuggled closer, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling utterly safe, utterly loved. Sleep found them quickly, a deep, peaceful slumber, a shared dream woven from the threads of their passion. The fire slowly died down, leaving behind a comforting glow of embers, and the wild night eventually gave way to a quiet, serene dawn. Winding a car. She awoke slowly, gently, to the softest light filtering through the cabin window. The storm had completely passed, leaving behind a pristine, hushed landscape. The first thing she noticed was the warmth of his body against hers, his arm a comforting weight across her waist, his breath soft against her hair. A profound sense of peace settled over her, deeper and more complete than anything she had ever known. She shifted slightly, turning in his embrace, her eyes fluttering open to meet his. He was already awake, watching her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. His eyes in the morning light were warm pools of tenderness, reflecting the love that had blossomed between them in the dark of the night. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice still a little rough with sleep, but filled with an undeniable affection. "Morning," she replied, her voice husky, a soft blush rising to her cheeks as she remembered the glorious passion they had shared. There was no awkwardness, no regret, only a lingering warmth that settled deep in her soul. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her nose, and finally, her lips. It was a gentle kiss, a promise of a new day, and a deepening bond. "Sleep well?" he asked, his thumb gently tracing the curve of her hip beneath the blanket. "Better than I've ever slept," she confessed, snuggling closer, inhaling his scent, which was now familiar and comforting. "It's so quiet." "The storm broke," he said, "just as we did." His gaze held hers, a knowing smile playing on his lips, acknowledging the beautiful metaphor. They lay there for a while longer, simply enjoying the quiet intimacy, the warmth of their bodies intertwined beneath the blanket. The cabin, once a shelter from the storm, now felt like a sacred space, a sanctuary where something beautiful and profound had unfolded. Eventually, the call of hunger stirred them. He rose first, stretching his powerful frame, then pulled on a pair of soft sweatpants, his movements easy and fluid. She watched him, a quiet admiration in her gaze, feeling a delicious sense of belonging. She, too, found a comfortable shirt and her own sweatpants, feeling a new kind of comfort in their shared domesticity. He started the fire again, coaxing the embers back to life with gentle prods, filling the cabin with the comforting aroma of wood smoke. She moved to the small kitchenette, finding the coffee beans and the old-fashioned grinder. The rhythmic whir of the grinder filled the air, a familiar, comforting sound. They moved around each other with an unspoken ease, a silent choreography born of their newfound intimacy. He made a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, while she poured 2 steaming mugs of coffee. They sat at the small wooden table by the window, the morning light streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The world outside was transformed. The trees, previously lashed by the wind, now stood serene, their branches heavy with glistening droplets. The air was crisp and clean, and the sun, finally breaking through the clouds, cast a golden glow over the freshly washed landscape. It felt like a new beginning, a world reborn. They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated by soft smiles and lingering glances. There was no need for constant chatter, for words to fill the space between them. The night had spoken volumes, and the morning was a testament to its profound message. Their eyes communicated a shared understanding, a deep, resonant connection that transcended mere physical attraction. As they finished their breakfast, he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, a simple gesture that sent a wave of warmth through her. "This," he said, his voice soft, "was everything." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "More than everything," she corrected, her eyes shining. "It felt destined." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I think it was. That storm, it brought us closer than I ever imagined possible." They spent the rest of the morning in quiet companionship, packing up their few belongings, cleaning the cabin, leaving it as pristine as they had found it. Each touch, each shared glance, was imbued with a new layer of meaning. The air between them hummed with a delicious, undeniable tension, not of longing, but of anticipation for what lay ahead. As they prepared to leave, standing by the door, he turned to her, his hands gently cupping her face. "I don't want this to end," he confessed, his voice earnest. Her heart fluttered. "It doesn't have to," she whispered, her eyes meeting his, filled with hope and a quiet certainty. "This is just the beginning." He smiled, a slow, breathtaking smile that reached his eyes. He leaned in, and their lips met once more, a kiss filled with the promise of future mornings, future nights, future storms weathered together. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a silent vow whispered between souls. Hand in hand, they stepped out of the cabin, leaving the warmth and intimacy of their sanctuary behind. The air was cool and invigorating, and the sun was high in the sky, painting the world in vibrant hues. The path down the mountain, once daunting, now seemed clear and bright. They walked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, a comfortable, reassuring contact. The wild night had indeed raged, a fitting backdrop to the primal, beautiful awakening that had unfolded between them. But now, in the glorious light of a new day, they walked forward, not on the precipice, but firmly on the path of something profound, utterly lost in the intoxicating promise of each other, and utterly found in the love they had discovered. This was not just a story of a single night, but the rich, sensual, enduring beginning of their forever.